I'm living proof that you can go from heartbreak to healing to total transformation. My divorce in 2020 led me to meditation and to the understanding that your greatest transformation begins with one thing: understanding yourself. Not just your human self, your divine self too. Because when you live only from the human lens, life feels like an obstacle course. But when you align with the divine in you, life becomes a colorful path, guided, adventurous, and deeply aligned. I'm Charu, and this podcast is your invitation to begin that journey. So let's begin. There are places you visit with your body, and then there are places that visit you. In meditation, in dreams, in the quiet moments between breaths. This is the story of how I found a temple underground by drawing it from a dimension I thought I had imagined. So the story begins in 2021 when I was on my meditative path, and deeper the meditations began, deeper I could go, the more relaxed I was. It became a journey into these, what I now call dimensions. And every time there was a different experience. And I had learned through my teachers that we should not get too attached to what type of experience we want to create because it's coming from the unknown. And whatever is relevant to you will find you. And so I was doing these deep meditations, and every day was a different experience. And I started to access through this meditative journey these moments where I could access an interstellar, interdimensional city. And that's the feeling I got. There was no actual city that I saw. It was just a vision and a very profound sense of being somewhere in a space. And, I let it be for the time because I had no language to articulate this at the time. And so I'm an artist and I love drawing. And so when words don't work, I usually draw. And there are many things over the years that I have been drawing, pieces of jewelry that I see, sometimes symbols, geometries. And so it was really easy for me to just draw this out. But this was a really extensive, powerful vision. And it was feeling like an entirely different dimension. And I started to draw it, but this was also full of color and some very specific colors and geometries. And so I made it in my notebook and I kind of forgot about it because, this is my notebook that had so many different experiences. Cut to July when I was at a retreat at a Joe Dispenza event. I, on the final day, had decided to meet a friend. And before I could meet the friend, the universe sent someone else. And I was really drawn to this beautiful lady, and we started chatting. And long story short, it ended up being a conversation about visions and what I see. And since I was new on the path, it was very interesting for me to speak to somebody who had been on the path for longer and had traveled globally and seen a lot of places. And so something in me told me to show her my notebook, which is very personal and private, which I never really show to anyone. But that day at that dinner, I decided to show it to this lady. And when she ran through some of the pages, she stopped at the page that was entirely blue and it had the structure in the middle. And I looked at her and I said, this is like a place, but I don't really know what it is. I think it's something interdimensional, or maybe it's some dimension. And she looked at me kind of smiling and knowing. And she said, well, this is an actual place. You're tuning in to an actual place. This place really exists. And it's called Damanhur. And it's real. And I couldn't believe it. So she went into her phone, she logged onto their website, and she showed me that it's an actual spiritual community in the Alps in northern Italy near Turin. And I was interested. And then she showed me one of the photos of their temples. And there were these gorgeous multi-story underground temple that had been hand carved by people from around the world. And these were called the Temples of Humankind. And Damanhur was their location. And inside this temple is a great hall. It's called the Great Labyrinth. And it has so many magical things, but it is very blue and very, very colorful and has a lot of sacred space to it. And they had this beautiful picture of this hall. And this lady and I both looked at each other. We looked at the screen. We looked at each other. And this lady said, I think that's what you are connecting to and drawing. And I have to say, I'm a skeptic when it comes to making leaps like that. But the similarity of the color, of the structure in the middle, of what I was seeing was so much there that it was hard to ignore. Most of all, though, it was the feeling that I was getting. As soon as I saw this temple and I saw that great hall with my eyes, which means that with my senses instead of just my inner eyes, I felt this feeling in my heart and something tugging at me saying, this is important. To cut a long story short, this was the beginning of my interest in Damanhur. And after that, I was like, I made a mental note of, wow, this is pretty interesting. It could be amazing. Then I got on with life. I went back to my home in New York and I continued my practice. And I wasn't really attached to any of it. It felt like an interesting thing, but I really didn't want to take it any further at the time. And then slowly in my meditations, I started connecting to this person that felt very real and very much somebody that I've always felt like I had known for a long time. And I couldn't pinpoint who this was. This was nobody that I had met in this life. It didn't look like any of the family members I have or friends or greater community. I could very clearly see a face and I could see an eagle every time this person would show up. And I could not understand what this was. And so, as usual, I kept drawing some of the things in my notebook and I let it be. And many months later, I was on a quest to find out a little bit more about Damanhur. And I figured out that Damanhur is a beautiful spiritual community that was built from nothing by its founder, whose name is Falco Tarasco. And when I looked at the photograph of Falco for the first time on Damanhur's website, I immediately recognized it as the person that I was connecting to in my dreams and in my meditations. And that was really interesting because I had looked at the temples, but I had not really dived in yet with any stories about the founder, or I had never even laid eyes on his image. And that was interesting. And that's all I saw. And I made a mental note that, this is something interesting. And so slowly over the months, the interest grew, my curiosity grew. And I kept feeling like this tug now to go to Damanhur. And I honestly, I did not lean into it for the longest time. And a year passed, and finally, I had so many experiences in my meditations that were so synchronistic. And it would always take me back to the idea of Damanhur, that so much so that I was actually having an astrological reading the next year in the middle of the year. And even my astrologer, who is a Vedic astrologer from India, also mentioned that I should be taking a trip somewhere to Italy. And I told him the story and I said, do you think there's something there? And he said, yes, go. And so that was kind of like a strange outsider validation to something that I had been listening to inside myself for a while. And so I packed up my bags and I went. And I stayed there for 2 months. in this beautiful commune, I actually went for a really interesting activity called Campus, where you can immerse yourself in an immersive experience of Damanhur and live in their space. And they have all these different villages, like communities. And Damanhur is actually a federation of all these communities, with the temple and the main city being the central spine. And then you can go and live in all these different communities and really get an immersive experience of the many things. It's an entire ecosystem of how you can live a spiritual, meditative, creative life fully in sync with nature and with like-minded people, and create a community living. And so in June to July, so June and July of 2022, I spent in Damanhur and the nearby communities. And it was so interesting because when I went there for the first time and met some of the people that I had never met, there was a strange resonance where some of the people there also said that they recognized me, that they recognized my soul. And take it from me, all of this, as wild as it sounds, it was also strange for me because I was on the beginning stages of my spiritual path. I had really not ever thought that there was more to when you meet somebody and feel like, do I know them? Like, I never thought that there could be a soul connection. And so this was really interesting because people were feeling that for me. And these people had nothing to get from me and nothing to give to me. And yet that's how they felt. And I felt the same way. And Damanhur is a beautiful community of the temple in the middle. And the temple itself is an incredible hand-carved temple in the underside of a giant mountain. And Damanhur has so many spiritual, sacred energies that are getting channeled through this temple. And also, I think some of the things that I learned very early on this path is that spirituality is not something that you do outside of your life. It is your life. And Damanhur was very, very essential for me in understanding that in order to live a meditative, conscious, spiritual, intentional life, it is possible, because here is this founder who was like an insurance agent, Falco, and he left everything and followed his inner calling 50 years ago to go in the middle of Italy and gather people from around the world with a common idea and an intentional creation of community, and created this beautiful thing, and then created this beautiful eighth wonder of the world. Sometimes it's called the Temple of Humankind, this temple underneath a mountain, which was hand carved by many of these Damanhurians. And so that was a big intro to me of what is possible on this path. And I think it was a major sort of breakthrough inside, because I had been meditating and then I had my work life. And this was a great intro to how the two can meet. Also, another beautiful thing about this community is how they treat art as a vehicle for your spiritual growth and your meditation. And some of the most amazing ideas I learned about art and being an artist and being able to access and have your creativity unleashed, I learned in Damanhur, because all these people came out of nowhere. They were just regular people that came from around the world, followed the call of this founder, and learned all these skills and created the incredible temples. I have to say, you have to go to the temples to really understand the depth, the beauty, and the amazing feat of hand carving this temple out of a mountain. And it is done by regular people who decided for themselves that we're going to do this. And when the need of the hour was to become artists and creators and sculptors and stained glass artists because they wanted to decorate that temple to represent humankind, they became that. And to me, that was really powerful because at the time, I was a jewelry designer that had a job, but I really wanted to do something of my own. And it had to have the spiritual DNA. Amuleto, my jewelry company right now, did not exist then as a company. It was just an idea. And so being in Damanhur and seeing what was possible was an incredible window into why my soul led me to this place. And there are so many things about this place that you can uncover. Like, one of the things that I loved about it was these ancient looking spirals that Damanhurians create, which are for walking meditation. And these spirals are built from stones and charged with energy and color. And they're built in a certain way so that you can align with the energy of the earth and the ecosystem. And when you walk the spiral in a particular way, you really feel an energetic shift in your body. And it was so incredible that these spirals were built to a certain intention, whether one was built for health and digestion, something else was built for dreams and lucid dreaming. And all this knowledge was coming from a lot of the native spiritual tribes from around the world, but also from the futuristic knowledge of the founder, Falco Tarasco. At Damanhur, it was really interesting. The first day I landed, I was being driven by this amazing woman who was leading the campus. And I told her, ever since I've landed in Damanhur, I'm seeing this eagle everywhere. And as I was speaking it, she was driving me down this mountaintop and I saw the eagle right in front of us and she saw it too. And I said, is there a significance for the eagle? And that's when she told me that when the late founder, Falco, passed away, he really passed away in his body. And Damanhurians believe that his energy continues to carry in Damanhur, watching over all the stuff. And he's often seen flying around as an eagle. And that's what Damanhurians believed. His energy is carrying on Earth in the form of an eagle, which was incredible for me because I had been seeing the founder and the eagle since the time I got in touch. So this was another data point that I was like, you can't really make this up. And I think on the path of being in Damanhur and really immersing myself in their spirals, in their Selfica technology, in just being open to allowing the knowledge that Damanhurians believe that Falco really came from the future and that he was actually an Atlantean who went in the future, came back to sort of help humans form this incredible community and sow the seeds of a different type of humanity, of a different type of system to live in, so we could affect more change of how humanity across the globe is dealing with disconnection from nature, disconnection from each other. And the word Atlantis at the time for me was really, really difficult to digest. And I have watched many documentaries on Gaia TV talking about Atlantis, but never had I ever in my life associated that with a living person, or even crazy that on my own meditative path, I figured out that I may have shared a lifetime with this founder in Atlantis. And that was a difficult realization at the time because I felt like my mind had completely made it up. But when I went to Damanhur and I went to a lot of their sacred sites, I immersed myself in the knowledge. All I can tell you is that when you know you know. And that knowing is louder than the noise in the brain. And I know that we have been trained in not wanting to give credence to any of this, and that human beings go from point A to point B. But what my growth on this path has taught me is that we are not just human beings made of flesh and bones going from point A to point B. We are divine beings having a real life experience. We are walking a spiritual path, and it's not linear. And many of you may also have noticed your own experiences with time dilation or traveling dimensions or astral travel. I feel that these ideas may sound very, very far out for some of us. But if you tune into your own direct experience and allow this information to come to you, then I have found that there really is a lot that we don't know and we don't understand and don't comprehend. But the important word there is to allow the information to just come to you and to just receive it. You may not know what to do with it. That will also be revealed in some time. Like in my case, I knew about Damanhur's existence for a year and didn't do anything about it. But slowly, as I allowed myself to just work through this information and to see where it led me, I was pleasantly surprised, because those 2 months in this community where they were living with each other, meditating together, creating oneness with the local ecosystem and how they were doing it, how they were treating their schools. They have a school for children from 0 to 14 years old, which is not a school that is run in the way our schools are. They have a very different concept of teaching people math through like the jungle gym, it's very different. And to be able to get an exposure to that, to be able to get an exposure to all these people, starting with the founder, taking a feeling and your inner knowing and really walking that path, so much that he was able to create an entire community that was built by people that followed him from around the world. And it's not a religious place. It's not dogmatic. They have their own meditation philosophies. They live in different villages that they call communities around the area, and they have their own personal lives. But they come together as a community, and they're all centered around this temple. And so for me, it was a great intro to what is possible. And it put in me a desire and a dream to create something and to really believe in my idea of creating spiritual jewelry, which I have created in my fine jewelry line called Divine Amuleto. And also in being, I think the biggest contribution that I would say my visit to Damanhur really gave me was confidence in my inner knowing, that sometimes your brain may not know, but your soul does. Your soul remembers things from a long time ago. But that is only possible for you to accept and embrace if you think yourself as a mystical being having a human experience. But if you think of yourself as a human being only, flesh and bones, matter to matter, then this worldview is not for you. And I'm not saying that anybody has to accept the worldview that anyone else suggests. What I'm saying is my journey was of direct experience. And that, to anyone listening, I would say, if you're having mystical experiences, or if you want to have mystical experiences, then the single word I would say that you put your attention to is allow. And then whatever is relevant to you, the field will produce it. In my case, it was Damanhur. In your case, it could also be Damanhur. It could be any other community. It could be anything else. But to put the word allow in front of it makes us accept that we may not know 100%. And that's okay, because we don't have to know all the things at one time. I think we can just safely assume that it's okay to not know. And I'm going to walk this path because it's a colorful path. And life is going to bring me what I need from the unknown. And that's okay. And those were some of my most magical learnings from being in Damanhur. Of course, I also walked this amazing spiral that was built with beautiful crystals from around the world. I will try to link the photo of it in the show notes from their website. And this spiral was built inside a dome. It was honestly the most magical space that ever was, because the crystals there have an energy that is unmatched. And the beauty of Damanhur is that it has great respect for shamans, for spiritual tribes, for tribes, natives around the world. And they invite and also get a lot of people from tribal leaders, shamans that go to Damanhur and put their knowledge and information and energy into the temple and the sacred spaces. And that is something I think that is important about Damanhur, that they really value ancient knowledge and some of the things that ancients used to do, like creating communal sacred spaces, like the temples, creating smaller sacred spaces like the spirals where people can go and recharge their energy, really living in tune with nature, which means that you're farming, you are growing things from a very different perspective. You're not harming the land, you're following good practices, and you are really living in nature, being one with it. So, which means that you're not a predator that is killing other things or using things that harm nature. So it's an entire ecosystem that is built around all these ideas, and they live in community, which to me, it was interesting because I personally can't imagine living in a house with 20 people, but there are other modes of communal living there. And it's just beautiful that they've taken on this idea that living in community is important for your spiritual growth and also makes life fun. And on that note, one of the last things that I loved about Damanhur was how fun and simple they were and how important they think fun is, because they say a lot that you don't have to take life too seriously to be a serious meditator or not. It doesn't mean that you have to be a serious person, and you can do things seriously, but you don't have to take yourself seriously. So that was another amazing thing about this beautiful place. If you meet anyone who's Damanhurian, you will also notice that they take animal and vegetal names, which means that when they become Damanhurians in their spiritual journey, they decide that I will take a new name, and that name is a public ceremony where they take the name, and it's kind of like a game, and they really have it as a really fun communal ceremony of taking a new name. And the first name is that of an animal or a mythical creature. So it establishes your connection with nature. And the second name is a vegetal name, a plant name. And it's kind of like a declaration of like, I'm taking on a new phase of my life. I'm rebirthing. And I thought it was really, really, really fun because some of the people that I met there had some really beautiful and fun names. So that's some of the most interesting parts about Damanhur. I think it is, in my attempt to share this story, my intention is to allow you to dive deeper onto your spiritual path because it is really colorful and adventurous. Had I not been meditating, I would not have had these experiences, and I would not have the respect for these experiences. And I would not allow these experiences to shape my life the way they have. And I can tell you that mystical experiences are just around the corner. We just have to allow them and be non-attached to them looking a certain way. How it looks for me may not be how it looks for you. And that's okay, because how it's going to look for you is going to be wonderfully designed by the field. And on a parting note, if you enjoyed this episode, I have a really special guest coming on my next episode. I'm actually getting to chat with the wonderful lady and a Damanhurian leader, Formica Coriondola, who will be on your colorful path in the next episode, talking about Damanhur, talking about some of the philosophies they abide by, and also our shared time together. This is going to be such an amazing episode. She'll share her own story of going from being an electrician in Florence to getting to Turin and spending 40 years in that area. She's one of the founding leaders and a truly admirable woman. So if you enjoyed my mystical journey to Damanhur, you need to tune in to our next episode. I can't wait for you to introduce you to Formica. This is a short episode that I wanted to share my mystical experience of finding this unbelievable city that is called Damanhur. And in the middle of Italy, I, in this life, have no connection with it, but my soul remembered it. And that is an experience I will never forget. And I will let it lead me into many other areas of my life. So if you are doubting any of your mystical experiences, let this episode be a reminder that it's okay, that you're not strange, nothing is weird, and that all that needs to be revealed to you will be revealed to you because you are a mystical being on your colorful path. On that note, I say goodbye, and don't forget to tune in to the next episode because we are going to be speaking to the leaders from Damanhur. This is Charu, your host of Your Colorful Path. If this episode moved something in you, please hit the follow button. Please leave a review, a star rating for us. It really matters to me to know how you feel about things. And I hope you continue to walk this colorful path with me. You can reach me anytime through Divine Amuleto, my Instagram account. That's where I share the tools, practices, and fine jewelry that supports this journey of transformation. So do check it out. Thank you for being here. Until next time, may you keep listening to the wisdom within.